Brexit bombshell, how Norway's negotiations with EU eerily mirror UK exit. Brexit negotiations eerily reflect a struggle Norway had back in the 70s when it chose not to join the European Economic Community (EEC). The precursor to the EU documents unearthed by Express.co.uk have exposed. In 1972, Norway held a referendum on whether it should join the EEC and it voted against it, 53.5% to 46.5%. In contrast, in the UK, Edward Heath's government signed the Treaty of Accession in 1972 without directly asking the public, and then in 1975 Labour's Harold Wilson held a referendum on whether to stay, in which 67% voted to remain versus 33% to leave. Norway later had a referendum on joining the newly formed EU in 1994, which Norwegians again rejected, this time by only 52% of the vote. According to recent polling data from Sentio, Norway is now even more determined to remain independent outside the bloc, with only 22% wanting to join and 67% wanting to stay out. After Norway's 1972 no result, it entered a period of negotiations with the EEC as to what their future trading relationship would look like, similar to the Brexit negotiations now. The rhetoric used against Norway after its 1972 referendum decision is eerily similar to that which the UK faced after its decision to leave the EU in the 2016 referendum. Essentially, the Norwegians were told they could not expect to enjoy the benefits of the bloc without being a full member, and it was put across in a similarly patronising way. There were also assumptions that Norway would end up changing its mind, insinuating that it had simply made the wrong decision the first time around. In documents unearthed by Express.co.uk at the National Archives reveal that the British Embassy in Oslo believed that Norway would eventually recognise the error of their ways and decide to join the bloc. They even predicted that it would take just 2 to 5 years before they would U-turn on their decision. One diplomat wrote to the Foreign Office in October 1972, in brief, the pattern of the sort of agreement that is likely to emerge from the negotiations is, I imagine, fairly clear already, and the problem is essentially whether we should approach the negotiations in a spirit of goodwill. My own feeling is that we should, and it would be more helpful to the pro-marketeers and more damaging for the anti-marketeers if we could prove that, with the best will in the world, a trade agreement cannot, in the nature of things, afford to Norway all the benefits of full membership of the EEC. Only then may the anti-marketeers come round with time to recognise the error of their ways, and when that time comes, the closer Norway is to Europe the easier will be the transition to full membership. Similarly, many Remainers in the UK and EU politicians in Brussels have acted like the UK simply made the wrong choice in 2016. Many touted the idea of a second Brexit referendum, which sent a message to voters that they should just keep voting until they choose the correct option. Guy Verhofstadt, former European Parliament Brexit coordinator, repeatedly backed a second referendum, and former European Council President Donald Tusk admitted it was his personal dream that the UK would change its mind. Similarly, UK Remainers called for a so-called people's vote and marched on London several times to this effect. However, what appeared to differ in the Norwegian and British experiences was this element of goodwill. The diplomat wrote in 1972, if we start the negotiations in a general spirit of let them stew, I am not at all sure that, far from forcing these stubborn people to change their minds quickly, we may not rather make them dig in their toes, threaten to leave and eventually leave NATO and look for other markets for their goods in Eastern Europe. In brief, I think that an unforthcoming attitude will retard rather than advance the data when the Norwegians may change their no to a yes. For such a change to come about, the lowest estimate is still 2 years, most people say 5. While the arrogance of assuming the country would change its mind remains, this idea of goodwill appears to have faded over the years. The EU have been extremely difficult to deal with throughout Brexit negotiations, which has led some to claim the bloc is simply making it as challenging as possible to put off any further dissenters. What's more, it is now clear that the UK is not going to rejoin. As Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage said on his last day in the European Parliament, this is it, the final chapter, the end of the road, a 47-year political experiment that the British frankly have never been very happy with. What happens at 11 p.m. this Friday, January 31, 2020, marks the point of no return, one we've left, we are never coming back, and the rest, frankly, is detail. We are going, we will be gone, and that should be the summit of my own political ambitions. On the other hand, Norway's decision was arguably more reversible. They could decide to have another referendum and join the bloc at a later date, meaning the goodwill might be more useful.